Hey folks, welcome back to the My Intellectual Energies are wholly devoted to a 40-year-old computer show. Hopefully that's not what I call this video. I mean, you already know what I called this video, but ironically, I don't. So, who knows, could be anything. Anyway, what are we talking about today? We're talking about TI-99 RPGs, and one amazing upcoming RPG in particular, Realms of Antiquity. A game that just might be the best thing to come to the TI-99 4A's since TI-99 Dragon's Lair entered my life, saved my marriage, cured cancer, ended world hunger, and restored honor, truth, and justice to the struggle of modern man in the 21st century. I mean, it was really, really good. But that was another year and another video, and as crazy as it is, the TI-99 game development scene in 2020 moves too fast to focus on the last big thing at any given time. There's just too much out there. So, let's talk TI-99 RPGs and take a look at what Realms of Antiquity is going to add to the TI-99 RPG library in 2021. As far as that TI-99 RPG library goes, well, RPGs have been an important part of the TI-99 library since pretty much the beginning, with Tunnels of Doom having been an early hit whose popularity has endured, and it's a game a lot of 99ers enjoy coming back to even today as one of the system's classics. But as good a start as that was, later TI-99 RPGs made their own contributions to the genre. Games like Wizard's Lair and Wizard's Revenge, as well as Legends 1 and Legends 2. Those later editions helped fill out the TI-99 RPG library in the years after TI themselves had abandoned the platform. Still, I feel like no game's ever managed to do everything the TI-99 could do with an RPG. It's never had that complete, mature RPG experience that delivers all the things the genre can at its best, which is to say storytelling, characters, quests, combat, spells and magic, world lore and history, all the elements RPGs eventually brought together as time went on and the genre matured. Now, on the one hand, if that next level RPG was missing from the 80s TI-99 library, it's pretty understandable. The RPG genre did a lot of growing up in the years after the heyday of the TI-99. It's not really fair to expect Ultima 4 or Ultima 5 on a TI-99 in 1982. But on the other hand, here we are in the 2020s, and by my watch, it's been a while since the 80s. I won't say how long, since I don't want to alarm anyone. But it's been a while. If you were in your 30s when the TI-99 4A came out, you might be in your 40s, even your 50s now, who knows? So probably we can do better. And ultimately, the reason I'm making this video is that one person has put the work into taking TI-99 RPGs to the next level. That person is Adam Haase, aka Adamantier. Previously, he developed Wizard's Doom as an addition to the Wizard series that I'd mentioned earlier. But he didn't stop there. For the last decade, he's been working on something even better. That big next step is, of course, Realms of Antiquity, and it's coming soon to a TI-99 near you, hopefully. Won't be long before everyone gets a chance to decide for themselves whether this is in fact the final boss of TI-99 RPGs. But, while all the finishing touches get put into place, I'd like to take a look at Realms of Antiquity in its close to finished state, and give you a sense of just how big an event this is for TI-99 RPGers. So, what is Realms of Antiquity? Well, as far as the technical details go, it's a disc-based TI-99 RPG written in assembly, and while it requires the use of game discs, it can also launch from cartridge in the interest of speed and convenience. Which is definitely nice, as launching from cartridge is much, much faster than launching from disc. It also has one more unusual technical requirement. It needs 1 megabyte of Super Asgard memory system, aka SAM's bank switch memory. And that used to be a pretty rare and little used expansion card in the TI-99 community, but happily for Realms of Antiquity and TI-99 RPGers in general, 1 megabyte SAMs is as of this year easily available as an affordable pre-built sidecar. So that requirement is now pretty easy to satisfy as the game's release approaches. Otherwise, given it's a disk-based RPG, you'll of course need some sort of disk system to accommodate the 3 disks of data. The one folks use most these days being the Tippy, which hosts your TI disks on a connected Raspberry Pi via a sidecar or PEB interface. If you're interested in emulation options, on the other hand, Realms of Antiquity will run fine via Classic 99 and has been tested there extensively. So if you haven't got a Sam's card or sidecar and don't feel like you need one, or you just want the convenience of emulation, you can still play it that way. So that's what Realms of Antiquity is and what you need to play it. But the question I'm more interested in right now is, why should 99ers be excited about Realms of Antiquity as it nears release? What makes this particular TI-99 RPG a game changer? We've had TI-99 RPGs before, as I say, and we even had a good demonstration in recent times with the use of SAMs to make a TI-99 RPG engine reach that next level in Dungeons of Asgard, which was absolutely the first thing I did with my SAM sidecar when it arrived. And it is amazing for its own sake, incidentally, so check it out if you've got the opportunity. But what's so special about Realms of Antiquity? Well, it's thoughtful aesthetics for one thing, and that starts with the beautiful intro screen and theme music, which along with the prologue really set the scene and deserve to be heard. So, well, let's hear it. So that's a great invitation into the game world. I mean, just look at those adorable little people off in the distance. And despite the great intro tune, it really is those visual aesthetics rather than its music that are the highlight of the game in the long run. The game really makes the most of half-bitmap mode 9918A graphics. In half-bitmap mode, the screen is covered with 8x8 tiles, but instead of each 8x8 tile containing up to 2 colors, as in bitmap mode, each 8-pixel subsection of those tiles contains up to 2 colors, which is why those characters can be several colors instead of just one color and a background. And the game's environments aren't just detailed, they're also diverse. Different parts of the world have their own personality, and it's not just one big tile set. You'll begin your game on a hilly path near the village of Alpthorpe, and you can see here the main feature of the landscape is forests, mountains, and fields. But across the sea in the desert oasis of Ispahan, the world's very different. Both the landscape and the architecture of the region set it apart. As far as the sound goes, the game doesn't use sound and music too heavily, and that's an intentional design decision on Adam's part. And personally, I see the appeal in this approach. Over the course of a long session exploring Talania, I'd rather be listening to music of my choice, rather than a collection of square wave beeps from my system's TMS-9919 on indefinite repeat. So the use of meaningful sound effects when you're hitting an enemy or casting a spell, or what have you, but not much music for music's sake, that does work for me. Back to the graphics. Although the game's generally on an 8x8 grid in travel mode or a 16x16 grid during battle, its graphics don't confine themselves strictly to that grid. Terrain includes larger objects and landforms, and battles include larger monsters and enemies, like these ones. This game doesn't have the problem Wizard's Lair has, where every enemy is a tiny imp because a TI-99 sprite can only be so big. Enemies can also be pretty whimsical at times, like, for example, this is, in fact, my party fighting a door. And here's my party fighting a bookshelf. And here's my party fighting a bed. It all makes sense, I swear. So the game has a sense of fun, and along with the distinctive enemies, the attacks and spells have distinct animations, which gives them character and makes the battle easier to follow. You don't have to wonder if you cast heal on the right character. A shimmering cross just appeared over their head when you did. And heck, even the game text has some graphical flair in Realms of Antiquity, with that cyan illumination on its lower edge. Well, speaking of the text, another thing that makes the game special definitely is its writing, starting with the prologue, in which you're somehow magically transported from the modern world into the world of Talania. And that opening is a well-worn fantasy trope for sure, but hey, like any other tool, a trope only gets to be well-worn if it works well, like this one does. So, nothing wrong with that. I'll take this and I'll take my amnesia tropes in my RPGs every time. I'll show the whole prologue sequence here, but you'll need to pause if you want to read it all. Worth reading, though, if you're interested in the backstory. As you play the game, dozens of books found on bookshelves across the game world continue developing the game's lore, so you'll have plenty more reading available once you're exploring it. These are often part of a series like Imperial History or Local Tales or Mythological Creatures, but some books are one-offs like The Tomb of Umgazur or The Little People or The Founding, and those are often tied to a particular region or location. So there's lots of lore to be had inside the game, but like many good lore-rich RPGs, Realms of Antiquity will put important parts of that lore in the print materials. The game itself does feature a nice help menu listing game item and state icons inside the game, but we also get a reference card which lays out the game's icon system there, as well as its controls. And the instruction manual has a lot of key information about the class system, magic system, skill system, and such. There's a lot to take in, so the manual is essential for explaining the game's systems and how they tie into the world's lore. And finally, a map of Talania lays out the geography of the world for you, with just enough detail to provide the lay of the land and give you your bearings, without filling in all the fine details. I find I refer to the map a lot during play. It's definitely essential to the Realms of Antiquity experience. Back to the in-game experience. While world lore is nice, of course, the in-game text isn't just world lore for world lore's sake and reading for reading's sake. It's also how you meet the game's cast of characters. Usually, talkative characters have quest objectives to point you towards, but townsfolk are also just happy to welcome you to town or remind you of their troubles, or thank you for helping them. In dialogue with quest NPCs, you can navigate the game's dialogue using a keyword system, where you select the topic you want to talk about, or the action you want to take from a number of options. Characters you encounter even occasionally ask to join you on your quest. Some of them do take convincing, but if you've got common goals or destinations, you can find allies in Talania along the way. And once you've got a new party member, that character will occasionally have things to say about your travels. Party members will comment on events and people around them, and will even talk to each other. They're not just hired swords, they're also a character in the story. You won't have to rely on picking up hitchhikers to build your party, though, if you don't want to. The game's party creation mechanics can outfit you with a full adventuring band if you prefer that route. And with 9 classes, all with their own niche, you got lots of options. A warlock, for example, is a battlecaster with some limited martial abilities, who can use daggers, axes, maces, staves, and wands, wears cloth armor, and favors violet magic. Race and gender are not options during character creation. Race in the fantasy sense wouldn't really work in the game's context. The protagonist is from Earth, and, presumably not the elf, orc, or kobold part of it. Instead, you get to pick a name and assign stats to your characters to min-max to your heart's content, or make them your own. You'll probably want to refer back to the manual to remind yourself of what each stat does, what skills it's good for. Do you want a ranger who's mainly an archer, but also a secondary caster? Focus on cunning and reason. The game lets you start with a party of up to 4, meaning you don't have to decide on any one class or make everyone a jack of all trades. You can try whatever mix suits you and build around complementary roles like tank and healer and archer and whatnot. Or you can just run 4 suicidal glass cannon wizards, which is actually pretty great. Definitely an option for a later playthrough. And once you've got a party, it's time to start exploring that world I keep going on about. As I'd mentioned earlier, you start your journey in a mountain pass near the village of Alpthorpe, and the journey into town will usually be your first. Alpthorpe, incidentally, roughly means elf village in North Germanic languages and gives you a hint about what you'll deal with in your first quest. It's a small town, but it'll give you a sense of the role of civilization in Talania. In town, you can talk to townsfolk and make your first contacts with characters who can tell you about their world and the problems they're facing. Maybe you can help them. Or maybe they can help you figure out how the hell you got here to this strange world. As in any town, you'll also find an inn where you can hear the local rumors or find a bed, as well as shops for buying provisions and items and improving your equipment. It's a humble beginning, and there's a much bigger world out there ready to be explored beyond Alpthorpe's quiet little cape. So while you'll move on from Alpthorpe fairly quickly, it's a long while before you'll see everything there is to see in the world of Talania. The much larger city of Port Boniface, for one, is just up the coast, and you'll likely head there soon. And one thing you'll find there is going to be a key to exploring Talania's larger world, namely boats and ships that are available in port towns. Boats will let you travel under your own control wherever you like in rivers and shallows, while ships will take you from port to port across the open seas. As you explore, you'll find towns and villages full of life and activity like these ones, but you'll also find ruins and dungeons and enemies and threats and all those things beyond their walls. As I say, Talania is a world where characters you meet have a story to tell about their relationship to the world around them, and sometimes to each other, and it's a world where those stories matter to each other. But it's also a magical world, of course. In Realms of Antiquity, magic isn't just a combat discipline or a way to hurt your enemies. Spells serve a wide collection of purposes and have wide significance to the game's lore. Some spells are just combat tools, but others are only used outside combat in travel mode. Some, particularly those from yellow magic, affect the way you perceive the world around you. Scan will give you complete knowledge of an enemy, while Magic Eye reveals your immediate surroundings, even seeing through walls, and so on for dozens of spells you'll find yourself using over the course of a game. These are organized into spellbooks, and each spellbook offers a different window into the game's magic system. Each contains a limited set of spells, all of which you have access to with that spellbook equipped, and you'll switch spellbooks to adjust to your changing needs. Something else that spellbooks do in the game is offer some of the various nods the game makes to TI-99 gaming history. Actually, quite a lot of the world of Talania takes inspiration from the people and history of TI-99 games. Fort Granros serves as a nod to Don Granros of Legends series fame. Doom of Mondular ends up as the Mondular region of the game's world. Tunnels of Doom, on the other hand, unsurprisingly, given its significance, sees a number of borrowings and tributes, including fountains that can heal or hurt the adventurer, and the Hero class, which is a class playable when starting a solo campaign. And yes, the game's spellbooks are named after a who's who of the TI-99 game communities past and present. So in conclusion, Realms of Antiquity is a vast world with a lot to explore, and we should all be looking forward to exploring it. I figure we'll be exploring it for a long time to come, because there's a whole lot to do in Talania. Even avid RPGers will probably take months to make it through the whole of the main quest for the first time, at least if they're stopping to smell the roses. And when you've done it all, you can always roll up a new party with a completely different build and try doing it differently. then maybe picking up a different NPC along the way. Probably next time it's 4 glass cannon wizards for me, because anything less would be cowardice. If you'd like to read more about Realms of Antiquity pending its release, the good news is Adam has written a lot about it on his blog, Tilting at Windmills, which is linked in the description. Check it out, and you can also find news on release progress in the Atari TI-99 development forum. Thanks for watching, folks. I'm looking forward to joining you in Talania. This is Pixel Pedant signing off.